I have to bring this to your attention, as ultimately it can affect us all, and it's setting a very dangerous precedent, particularly highlighting the risks a show host takes on what and how they present their information to their audience, and how it can be potentially used against them, either by the people using the system against us, a sense of justice, a need to gain revenge, or just plain greed and vindictiveness. Time will tell which category the following comes under. I will not speculate, I will just present the facts. Following some sort of bad interaction between three particular show hosts and a guest that was coming on their show who didn't turn up, words were exchanged that became hostile and led to the non-showing guest delivering court papers to the show and the host. That case, Robert David Steele versus Goodman complaint on September the 1st, 2017, case number 3, period 17 CV 601. Plaintiff Steele seeks $6 million in compensatory damages, $18 million in total, as threefold damages in accordance with section or statute 18.2-500 of the Virginia Code. Also $350,000 in punitive damages. Pre-judgment and post-judgment interest is being claimed, and attorneys' fees and costs, potentially costing the three hosts charged $6.5 million each in compensation. Now, taken from the court documents, Robert David Steele describes a long list of professional accomplishments, presents himself as a former CIA clandestine operations officer, a former civil servant, and a holder of various advanced degrees. Steele works to redirect the craft of intelligence away from spies and secrecy enabling war and waste towards open sources and methods favourable to peace and prosperity. In support of this work, Steele formed and operated a company that ultimately helped draft the, quote, NATO Open Source Intelligence Handbook, unquote. Steele, in the court documents, asserts that without elaboration that for over 20 years, Steele has dedicated himself to teaching individuals and organisations about the value of holistic analytics, true cost economics, and open source everything engineering. In the court documents, Steele stated he was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize based on this work. In 2006, Steele founded Earth Intelligence Network, which is a Virginia 501c3 not-for-profit corporation, and the plaintiff stated this in his actions. In 1993, again this is from the court documents, Steele formed Open Source Solutions Inc. 1993, which Steele describes as a, quote, a pioneering open source intelligence, OSINT, firm. OSINT is a term used to refer to data collected from publicly available sources to be used in an intelligence context. My comment is, what is vague is what does publicly available sources entail? Question mark. Which is then transferred into an intelligence context. The question is, how is that different to now? Question mark. Would it be safe to ask why Mr. Steele drafted the open source technology for NATO? Question mark. Since when have NATO been open with the public? Question mark. Would it be prudent to ask why Mr. Steele has set up that company in Virginia, which of course houses the CIA, of which he was a former operator? Is that not a conflict of interest? Question mark. Is it possible that it could be construed as a subsidiary of the CIA that could potentially get round certain restrictive rules? Question mark. To be clear, these are all questions, not statements. I think the public should be informed in greater clarity than has currently been proffered. Now, the gist of Mr. Steele's complaint of the three people were trashing him on various shows and telling people not to support Steele. And the donations from his website, which I think was Earth Intelligence Network, although it could have been the open source one, but I think it's the Earth Intelligence Network one. Until the three defendants trashed on Robert David Steele, his website was procuring $29,000 a month in donations. And according to the court documents and Mr. Steele's comments, that dropped down to $200 a month following the alleged defendant's attack on Mr. Steele. Now, Steele states in court he posted the financials on his website. This week I looked for the figures and no figures were evidenced. The question is, where was the $29,000 per month being spent? Can it be evidenced? Question mark. Is this service for the public benefit or a select group of intelligent experts who to date have shown no desire to share anything with the public? Should it not be made clear where this intelligence is available to the public, seen as the public are paying for it via his website? Question mark. As a side note, how is the Earth Intelligence Network not-for-profit group allowed a donation button on their website when the People's Club, also a 501c3 non-profit, was fined $250 for the same donation button on our website? Question mark. Robert David Steele also created the Golden Candle Society, of which you have to search deep to find out what it is or entails. But essentially, this is a private intelligence agents award ceremony. Not to people in the public. Oh no. Not people. It's like a Grammy Award for spooks. The awards were given to those who work for the following: Ministry of Defence and NATO. Another award was sent to the Metropolitan Police in London. A guy who works for Exploited Child Unit in Brussels. He's not doing a good job, is he? The Ministry of Interior, Holland, for promoting open source. Swedish Military Intelligence, Italian Police Department, and a group called Spot Image, due to its global coverage with multiple satellites, the availability of vast archives of recent cloud-free imagery, and the recently introduced Eagle Vision ground station. Imagery, listen closely, suitable for meeting military and commercial needs for accurate maps and targeted packages. That is an intelligence term. I don't need to point it out. Other awards went to the Europol Drugs Unit, a Belgian judge. Again, does this suggest open source is for the benefit of the people or only a private agency? Question mark. Robert David Steele also set up a website with the interesting name of OSS.net. The original CIA was the OSS. Make your own mind up on that. There is a common theme of former agency people creating subsidiary private organisations, but essentially operating on behalf of a central organisation, and this is why we have NGO groups. They take the knowledge and expertise acquired within the agency and then run it with their own people. It gets around all kinds of legal aspects, away from the glare of government oversight because it's a private company, and allows them, with the installation of their people who came from within the organisation, to operate privately and practically above the law, in the same way Five Eyes is operating. Now, I'm not suggesting this is the case with Mr. Steele, as I cannot confirm it either way. But as always, I am open to what is the truth in that matter. There's a common theme with Mr. Steele and his involvement in the alt media community. And no, I don't want another Skype message because I mentioned the name Neil Keenan either. Robert David Steele approached Neil Keenan when Neil was getting exposed badly by myself as to who he is involved with. And Neil changed. Or if I believe several other sources, the original Neil was taken out. He met Benjamin Fulford next, and his appearance, demeanour and blog changed radically. Coincidence? Could be. You choose. It's a question mark, not a statement. He then promotes open source as something new, when it was in production from 1993 with information garnered from his participation as a CIA agent. He was promising it would benefit the people, when clearly it's only benefiting the Five Eyes group. Again, unless he can provide evidence to the contrary, and then I will happily correct that statement as well. Steele was asked to appear on a Reddit forum back in 2017 under the name IAMA, where he was asked a series of questions, one involving Hillary Clinton, which the questioner pressed him for evidence proving that Hillary was a lesbian, pedophile, traitor and criminal, as stated by Mr. Steele, and he was asked, given his position, to back that claim up, to which Mr. Steele refused. Now, subsequently, the questioner, following that exchange, was then banned from Reddit. Again, make your own minds up on that narrative. I'm only presenting the evidence. Then he gets involved at a time when the alt media's successful exposure of church, politicians, Hollywood and state crimes, exposing pedophilia, and sets up the group ITNJ. And who does he have as his top person? A church minister of all people. Not suggesting that church minister was involved in it. It's like the police policing the police, isn't it? He himself was appointed a head position and yet has no background of what they were covering. None. Sacha Stone, again, no background of it, except he has family connections. And they proceed to completely ignore the extensive research on the subject by several alt media people, including one group in particular who have been active in this field a very long time, ITCCS. Ignores Kevin Annett's pleas, direct pleas to be involved, refuses and denies evidence to be put forward. Why would that group do that? Question mark. Now the question for the listener to ascertain is, if you are really exposing certain things, why not use the body of evidence already accumulated? Question mark. Why not use that expertise? Question mark. Is it not the case, by denying that, is it not saying that this is a closed shop? Question mark. Possibly run by the same system people that created the issues to begin with. Where is the transparency? Question mark. It's hardly open source, is it? Question mark. Well, actually, when you analyse open source, it is a private group collecting data on we the people for their own ends for the benefit of NATO. It states that in Mr. Steele's statement in the court documents. But they're not my words, they're his. And since when has NATO been open with their real purpose? Question mark. How many people are aware that NATO is a Rothschilds-owned private army? Fact. Is there a reason Mr. Steele asked for $6 million? Of all the figures he could have used, why 6 million? Question, not a statement. So Mr. Steele, it appears, is not being upfront with regards to the people he took to court for defamation. And those people went on to expose him, and it appears, judging by the comments, that they went a bit too far. They shouldn't have gone that far. And went a little off track with their exposure of Mr. Steele based on the evidence that was produced in the court documents. But how is Mr. Steele benefiting the alt media when he threatens them with financial ruin for disagreeing with him? Question mark. Why such heavy-handed dealings? Question mark. Surely a cease and desist would have been sufficient. Now clearly, based on his own words again, he has the might of the establishment behind him, as he referenced himself in the court documents, and referring his next attack victim to the British Home Office. Again, these are based on Mr. Steele's own words, not mine. Steele said in the court documents they were threatening him, and he draws a line with that. And yet documented evidence from email exchanges between Kevin Annett, Robert David Steele and Sacha Stone shows evidence of them both threatening Kevin Annett. Quote, if I hear from you again, or if you malign the ITNJ, whose undertakings are extraordinarily well documented, I may refer you to relevant authorities for a mental health examination, as well as an investigation for fraud and sedition. Sacha Stone, unquote. And, quote, you are henceforth blocked as being an obvious lunatic with no legal standing, I will defer to the INJ as to what legal action, including referral of you as an individual, Mr. Kevin Annett, to the authorities for psychiatric evaluation and possible removal from the public sphere. Robert David Steele," unquote. And the recommendation was sent to the British Home Office. I would suggest a line in the sound has to work both ways, Mr. Steele. Not all of us have the backing of Langley, the London Metropolitan Police, the UK justice system and the British Home Office, or NATO, like you have. But Mr. Steele wasn't finished there either. A website posted the court documents of the recent findings in Mr. Steele's lawsuit. Mr. Steele, not content with threatening Kevin Annett, now decides to threaten another website with these comments. Robert David Steele, quote, "This is actively defamatory and has been referred to both my attorney in the US, who just secured legal judgments against Jason Goodman, Patricia Negron and Susan Lutsky, and to the barristers in the UK who are handling legal matters for the ITNJ and Sasha Stone," unquote. He then went further. "If you do not immediately remove this post, you will be added to my defamation lawsuit as a co-conspirator, subject to a financial penalty once a final judgment is rendered," unquote. He then posts the court rulings himself and then states this, quote, "Read it and weep. By repeating their defamatory false statements, you are equally subject to legal judgment and financial ruin," unquote. Robert David Steele. These are the facts taken from Mr. Steele's own words and explanations in his court documents, plus copies of the direct comments made by Mr. Steele himself. I don't have to add interpretation to any of them. They stand and present themselves. And the questions arise from this is the following. And just to repeat, they are questions, not statements, so they can't be misinterpreted to suit certain agendas. 1. Is Robert David Steele helping people in or outside of the alt media? Question. 2. Has or is Robert David Steele acted with integrity within the alt media community? Question mark. Why is it okay for one party to threaten and yet others are not allowed to not only not threaten, but appears are not allowed to challenge any of their ventures or activities without being thrown lawsuits or threat of losing your liberty? Question mark. 4. If transparency is what Mr. Steele is promoting, why is he using the establishment to garner that? Question mark. Is that not flawed? Question mark. 5. When requested to come on our show a few years back, he made the lame excuse we didn't have enough listeners, and yet then proceeded to go on 2 shows with less than 1,500 listeners, which was around 10% of our listeners at the time. Even if that was the case, since when has alt media and transparency been about numbers? Question mark. Me personally, I'll go on any show to give people transparency, something Mr. Steele, given his interactions, does not appear to wish to follow. 6. If this body of information is correct, of which you can all look into for yourselves, for the details of which, and also ascertain for yourselves, and if you decide Mr. Steele is not acting in our best interests, the question is this somebody we need within our community? Question mark. Should you ascertain that Mr. Steele's actions and deeds are not what the community needs, is this type of bullying and heavy-handed tactics helpful to our community? Question mark. And the question that does not, repeat, does not include Mr. Steele or Sasha Stone is, are certain agencies now using people within our community to impose fear tactics to prevent us from exposing criminals?